Stop the cap.
All right, let me dive into it. Um, this is the second time I'm doing this video because I told Captain Solo the story, and then we actually, he gave me some feedback, and we actually dove into a completely different topic based off of something I said in our conversation, which is I talked about people misdiagnosing problems, and when they misdiagnose problems, um, there's a couple things that go on. Number one, you're not anywhere near the solution, right? It's like how white boomers are running around. Oh, the birth rates are down. The birth rates are down. You go ask Dave Ramsey why the birth rates are down. He'll tell you it's because young people are buying too much avocado toast. No, they don't make enough money. Daycare is $2,000 per child. Rent is $2,000. Plus, student loans that, for a lot of people, they're finding out or college degrees, they're finding out are useless because right now there's basically a job freeze due to, companies trying to figure out how to implement AI and try to cut costs, right? So, we're really looking at end stage capitalism. So, that's the real reason why people aren't having kids. I heard people trying to bring up, there's, poor people have kids in other countries. Yeah, they don't have any other opportunity. The mindset or the idea of what the average white person thinks about the quality of life that they would have and the conditions under which they would bring kids into the world, they would be able to afford kids and then have some money to play with, invest in. They weren't living paycheck to paycheck. That's not the dream. And people seeing that they're only going to live paycheck to paycheck, they're deciding not to have kids. They need to have a healthy cushion, which right now, in many regards, this society doesn't allow. Obviously white society has its own things going on, and they want to use a lot of the, shaming language and critiques and everything else. But again, them misdiagnosing the problem doesn't actually address, solving that problem. It's just a misdiagnosis of it. And so I'll get back to that in a second. But the other thing, let me say this real quick because I'm going to touch on that, but I want to start off where why this whole conversation came up. The other problem with misdiagnosing an issue is that it doesn't allow for self-correction or self-reflection, let alone self-correction. Misdiagnosing the problem is typically done in order to direct blame elsewhere, right? So the boomers, when you talk about the economy and why young people aren't having babies, they'll say, oh, it's because they're buying avocado toast, right? Even though, again, the whole difference now is that luxury items are cheap, where being able to afford life is expensive. It was the opposite in the past. Being able to afford life was cheap, your rent or your car note. That was cheap. But having things like, I remember when Martin Lawrence had the episode of the big screen television, the Hachitachi 2000, right? Or the Hachitachi 3000. I forget which it was, where him and Tommy and Cole were bowing in front of the TV. They were like Hachitachi, right? That was expensive. To have a projector, big giant TV in the 90s, that shit was expensive. And so luxury items are expensive. Now, luxury items are cheap relative to the cost of living, right? Somebody can go out there and they can get themselves, they can spend $200 on something, but, rent is still $2,000. Rent wasn't $2,000, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Even with people making, less money then, it was still a smaller portion of their overall income. So people are spending money on experiences. They're spending money on the things that they can actually afford to have some sort of enjoyment and fulfillment in life, despite the fact that they can't, really, settle down and get their life started, right? That reminds me. There's a video of and even though Legion of Men, he be on that bullshit, and I'll be wanting to fucking not unsubscribe to him, but I still like to keep my ear to the streets of what's actually going on in the racist white community. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah. So when you misdiagnose a problem, oftentimes it's done in order to assign blame, to another group. And that's one of the mistakes that black women make in these conversations. So let me back it up a bit and get into why this conversation happened. So I was talking to a woman who is an educator in Atlanta. And we started off, we were talking politics. We were talking about Trump and Charlie Kirk and, white supremacy. We were in agreement there. We were in agreement, the HBCUs being attacked and or threatened and just the whole thing, how the stuff ain't got nothing to do with black people and how white people are, foolish and they're just driving right over the cliff in authoritarianism, how expensive racism and white supremacy is, their birth rates being down. Again, the whole misdiagnosing the problem, right? Oh, what's the problem in America? Oh, the blacks are breathing up all the white man's air. How about the oligarchs are, freaking, taking all your damn money and they don't want to pay anybody. How about that, right? Or like talking about, the, why American politics don't work. Like, let's talk about AIPAC, right? Let's talk about, you have a political system that's basically bought and paid for, right? Right. These are the things that are more accurate to say than just to say, oh, it's because of politics don't work because of the woke left. Right. That's a misdiagnosis of the problem. Right. And again, the goal in there is to assign blame. But again, the blame doesn't allow you to look at some of the things that you might be doing wrong. Another example would be the way that that white men will try to blame their low birth rates on interracial dating, right? I've already talked about this. There's freaking like 120 million white women and there's 20 million black men, right? We already know that the majority of black men are not dating white women. Less than 1% of white women are married to black men, right? So black men don't even scratch the surface, but let the white men of Instagram and TikTok and everything else tell it. You know what I mean? It's because of the mud shark epidemic, right? Nonsense, right? Your issue is the fact that you don't make enough money to actually conduct your relationships with white women to the standards of the expectations that many middle class white people have. Right? Your forefathers were able to get themselves established at a much earlier age than you're able to. But instead of focusing on that, they misdiagnose the problem and say, oh, it's because the blacks are breathing up all the air. Black men are stealing all the white women. They're either stealing all the white women and fucking all the white women or they're killing all the white women, pointing to DeCarlos Brown, the guy with schizophrenia on the train. You see, misdiagnosis of the problem. It assigns blame. It points, to the other group. Yeah, that's what our problem is. But it doesn't address the real problem. And the thing is if the goal is to assign blame, you have successfully assigned blame, right? You can make up a reason and assign blame. But you've come no closer to actually, solving or correcting the problem because you're just way out there, right? It's like the whole thing with the WNBA and women saying that the reason why women in the WNBA make less money is because of misogyny and sexism, right? But okay, what's the real problem? Women don't even go to see the WNBA games. Why don't women go and pay to go see women play basketball? Because they just don't. Right. So again, the NBA has been subsidizing the WNBA. That's why the WNBA athletes make less money because they're less profitable. Right. That has nothing to do with with male sexism. See, that's a misdiagnosis of the problem. Oh, it assigns blame to men, but it doesn't ask the appropriate question. Why aren't women going to the WNBA games? You see? So misdiagnosis of the problem. Again, it assigns blame, but it brings you no closer to actually, solving the issue. So anyway, after we got off of the whole Trump, Charlie Kirk, and all that other shit, we got into, the whole black boys and schools, and I was talking about, their motivations. Then we got into talking about relationships and dating and everything. And there's a couple things that she said that kind of they stuck out to me, and I didn't want to start a fight, so I didn't dive too deep into them. But like, for example, I brought up the whole point about, black male motivation in boys and whatnot. And we were talking about patriarchy because somewhere earlier in the conversation, she brought up the whole thing with, MAGA and the right, and she brought up feminism, right? And that was kind of like a trigger for me. And then, I was like, okay, well, here's my opportunity. And then I brought up, patriarchy. And I could, subtly tell that was a trigger for her. So this is like the first time where, okay, we agree on the white supremacy aspect. But when we get into, okay, you said feminism and the hairs on the back of my neck went up. And then I said patriarchy and then the hairs on the back of your neck went up. So I'm like, okay, let's have that conversation then. So we're talking about the boys and all that. And I was pointing out, I brought up passport bros. That was another trigger for her. You know what I mean? And I got to talking about the boys and how, why a lot of the interracial relationships or like the interracial dating, that she's seeing. I'm like, why that's happening. And I brought up the point about how, the reward system that patriarchy is supposed to have, the acknowledgement. I'm like, you're never going to sell boys responsibility devoid of leadership and responsibility devoid of a reward, right? I've talked about this numerous times before. And I brought up how the other races of women are basically raised in the patriarchy and how their whole demeanor is different. And I mean, without hesitation, when I made the point, I was like, sisters ain't going to do that. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to do that. They see it as, slavery. And she acknowledged, I mean, without hesitation, that black women aren't going to do the sort of things that other races of women are going to do. Like, in terms of, like, how they interact and conduct their relationships with black men. She was like, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, just we're not doing that. And I'm like, well, that's why you're going to lose. You see, like, so, you'll have women, look, colorism is real. Let me say that again. Colorism is real. The colorist men, they exist in the community. Every time I post an image of an attractive black woman that I think are attractive, even though I think some of the black women are on bullshit, they'll try, because what's funny is, you'll have women talking about, well, where are the plus size women? This was about dark skinned women. And I posted the ones that I thought were attractive. What do you bring it? What are you trying to change the parameters for? See that that's where the bullshit comes in with sisters. Or when black women will try to accuse you, American FBA black women will try to accuse you of colorism for not liking the around the way girl. But then when they come back and try to, prove your self-hate, you know what I mean? They go all the way to some obscure tribe in Africa to find a woman and then present her in the beauty contest. I'm like, how come you didn't go and grab the around the way girl? How come you didn't grab the chick from Brooklyn or the chick from Detroit or the chick from Atlanta? Like, there's plenty of women that you could have grabbed right here, FBA women, and say, look at what you're rejecting and then make your point. But they don't do that. They go and find themselves some bald-headed chick from the Dinka tribe and then bring her over here and then be like, and she's beautiful. It's like, whoa. See, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. Your focus is not to have an honest conversation and be intellectually dishonest about this. No, your goal is to prove, how colorist and self-hating the black men are. So you go and you get something that you think that black men are going to obviously, reject. FBA black men. You that's what you go and you grab. You see? And so like we had our conversation about that, and then it dove into um the whole thing with the baby. Like one of the like we start talking about like how many women have kids and this, that, and third. I brought up the point that 61% of black women under the age of 50 are mothers, and only 46% of black men under the age of 50 are fathers, right? Brought that up. And because one of the things that she was saying, like, because there was a couple points that she made, like one of them was like, um yeah, black women are, they're fine being single. Because like when I brought up the passport bros, she took issue. She took umbrage with that because she's like, she didn't like the way that black men kind of flaunt the idea that they're dating out. And she's like, well, black women are dating out too, and we also are, what did she say? Black women are dating out too. And hold on, it's slipping my mind. And simultaneously bringing up the point about black women who are, no longer dating, or they're, they want their peace. That's what she said. They want their peace. And I kind of felt like the way that I felt when I have a video where I addressed Dennis Sperling, where it wasn't a personal attack on him, but I was like, look, dude, you can't sit with us. As a father, as a man that has a split household, the man who has split his DNA between two women, you know what I mean? You can't file the same complaints as childless black men. Okay? There's certain things that when it comes to, like, I didn't create any single mothers in the black community, so I can't be accused of that. There's a whole category of bullshit that doesn't fall on me. Okay? And so what I feel is like she's one of these black women that kind of does the same thing where without context, she doesn't realize, like, you can't, like, I hate when black women try to make the same exact point that black men do. Like, black men go over the fence to interracially date, and then the black woman will be like, well, we're interracially dating too. And I'm like, first off, y'all are not, quote unquote, interracially dating too. Because again, we already know black men are marrying outside the race twice as much as black women, right? When it comes to the newlyweds, like just looking at the newlyweds, 1 in 4, that's almost freaking 25%. 1 in 4 black men are marrying outside the race of newlyweds. I know 85% of black men marry black women, but that's including all the senior citizens and the people that got one foot in the grave. If you just look at newlyweds, if I got 4 black men, 1 out of 4 is marrying. If they got married today, 1 out of 4 is marrying outside the fence. 1 out of 8 black women are marrying over the fence. You see, so when black women, start bitching about, black men marrying outside the race, they're not wrong. And mind you, this is only, 33% of the black population, because majority of black people, 70% of black people aren't getting married. Okay, only 33% of black people are married. So again, you got to understand, the sort of the whole dynamic of percentages and why you got to get those whole numbers. We talked about even further. I was trying to reinforce the point about boys and how, because like when she brought up the point about Atlanta and the ratio of men to women is just crazy, and the women don't have to settle down because they got the pick of the litter. And I was like, this goes back to what I said about why we need to get off it's great to have black women and girls, and we're going to focus on girls, and it's better to have girls more educated or than the men are, even though they're not making as much as the men. But I'm saying, that it's better to focus on the girls. It's not better for the community to focus on the girls. You know what I mean? Because, like, example, somebody will say, well, how many white men are making $100,000? Like, you have whole suburbs of white men making hundreds of thousands of dollars and shit, right? You got whole suburbs. Like, you go across the country, anytime you're in a nice suburb, it's predominantly white. Like, those white women, they got there's plenty of white guys that they can get that make good money. There's plenty of white guys out there making good money. Now, if I say, 10% of the black community or 8% of the black male population is making over $100,000, right? And I say 10% of the white community is making over $100,000, right? I know it's like somewhere in that ballpark, right? I'm saying, you keep in mind that you're talking about 8% of 20 million black men. You know what I'm saying? Or less if you adjust for, 18 and over and shit like that. 10%. Right. Then you got to adjust for the ages because obviously no 25-year-old is trying to date a 60-year-old man that, has, that makes $100,000 a year. Right. So you got to adjust for all that. So numbers are relatively small. Right. But I'm saying if I go to the white community, same thing, same dynamics, adjust for age, all that other shit. But I'm saying that there's like 11 million, 115 million white men in this country. So saying 10% of 115 million is different than saying 8% of 20 million. So white women still have more options in that regard to go and find a white man who's making, six figures. They get to pick out of 100 million men versus black women who only get to pick out of 20 million men. So anyway, getting back to the women dating interracially, I cringe when black women are like, oh, look, and this is another thing. This is something. This one's coming directly from Captain Solo, and I totally agree with him because a lot of times black men will get into this argument about, oh well, you can't interracially date, and we can interracially date, and the other races of men don't want you. Okay, there's again, the white population outnumbers the black population 5.5 to 1. So again, there's plenty of white men out there that are interested in black women, just based off of the number in the population, whether they marry them or whatever. I'm not here to say, but the difference is that, and this is what black men get slammed about, because women have to sit around and wait to be chosen and be accepted. They're not like, women don't go out there and choose mates like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't if when it comes to interracial dating, women gotta wait to be courted. That's just the reality. But to see, the problem is when we have these conversations, a lot of black men will get into you can't date like we date, or you can't this, you can't that, or they don't want you, and this, that, and the third, and then you get stuck in black women trying to prove that that they can date, and then it just becomes an argument about that. And that's I agree, like, we don't want to get stuck there. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't interracially date, but let's be real about it. At best, a sister can bat her eyelashes, she can smile at a white dude, but she's not going over and going up to him and talking about a shorty. Like no. Okay, this is the whole thing with I think a sister recently made a video talking about that, about black women get the men that accept us, and black men get the women that something like we choose and what. Yeah, because typically men do the approaching. So that's why black men get hit with the colorism bat or the self-hate bat, more, because the idea is, yeah, do white women throw themselves, or other women throw themselves as black men? Yeah, you can find that all over the internet, on Instagram and shit like that. And then with the white boys with the mad steaming comments in the comment section, screaming about who's a mud shark, and, oh, she's going to be a single mom, even though 38% of white men, or 38% of white mothers, are, single moms, but they'll go up there and, they'll say all that shit. Right. But I'm just saying, men are always going to get charged more with, you went out there and you pursued that. Right. Because women have to sit around, and be chosen. So I'm like, when black women try to act like they can do the exact same thing as the men do, I kind of cringe a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, you're women. You're not men. You don't do that. This is why, again, you can more effectively slam the men when they're interracially dating than when women are interracially dating. But, that's just one point to make. But the other point, the other, and this is like a biggie, which is the whole, that whole 61% of black women under 50 being mothers, and 46% of black men under 50 being fathers. The whole we're resting, or the whole we're what was, we're living our best life, or we're trying to operate, whatever she said, like trying to operate in we want our peace, right? Yeah, that's what she said. We want our peace. It's like, okay, but how many of y'all are mothers? You know what I'm saying? Like saying that well, I'm not dating anybody, I want my peace. Saying that after you become a mother is different than saying that as a single childless man or a man. And not only that, this is like a key thing. This is a big issue right here. Okay, the way that women look at children and the way that men look at children are totally different. And the main reason it's totally different is because men don't get custody and don't expect to get custody. Okay, women, y'all can go out there and you can have a baby with whoever, and you can have a baby and you get to take the baby wherever you go. The baby's going with you. That's not the case for men. So again, speaking on the why, additionally, why there's a parental gap aside from women only sleeping with a minority of men, which was further reinforced and supported by the damn T app. Okay, and that whole scandal. Men are way less inclined to just simply, just go out there and have a baby, all willy nilly, because we don't get custody. You all get to take our child away from us. So a man saying, hey, I'm just gonna, I want my peace and whatever, I'm not saying that he's not fucking. He may go out there and have sex with a few women and just live the bachelor life, right? But I'm saying it's different. It's different coming from a childless man than it is coming from a woman who's already had a baby. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, she may have gone through the ringer. She may have gone through the ringer with a good dude. She may have gone through the ringer with a street dude. You know what I mean? She may have been, like as Six the Goddess pointed out, been competing with some other woman. However, she became, a single mother. It's a different context when, a woman has, has kids and she's talking about I'm resting and whatnot. And that kind of leads me back to the whole, what she said what I pointed out, what she said, at the very beginning of the conversation about misdiagnosing, the problem and her whole attitude of, I'm not going to, we're not going to do that. I don't know what it is with sisters in this whole soft girl life, soft girl era. You all, number one, you act like the relationship dynamics are in a vacuum. White men kind of act the same way. I had to point that out to Captain Solo about the, guys on social media, and how, like, back in the day, if it was the 1950s, you would have to cross the railroad tracks if you were going to interracially date. One of the things that white men completely overlook, even though, again, it's still a small portion of their community that actually dates out. But, they want to bitch about it online because the young white men, again, are misdiagnosing the problem, which is the white oligarchs, not sharing the wealth with them. So they're like hypersensitive to every interracial relationship, that they see. But the fact of the matter is it's not a closed ecosystem. You see all the white girls on TikTok and they do their little dance, their little hip dance, and all of them, even Indian women. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you want to talk about, FBA black men being a global phenomenon. It's like, oh, if I'm going to do a dance or if I'm going to post a video or I'm going to be sexy on Instagram or TikTok, I got to use African-American music. I got to use FBA music. You know what I'm saying? They might have there's a couple of videos where they'll have some, Afro beats or whatever. But for the most part, you going to hear, Lil Baby, you going to hear, the Migos or something. You going to hear all this music that's FBA music in the background. And again, that's just another avenue of giving FBA's men exposure. Global exposure. So, when it comes to, you got women that live in the middle of rural America. They live in Idaho. They live in Missouri or I don't know. Give me something. Give me some. Just flyover country, Wyoming, Utah, and shit like that. But they know, they never see black men on a daily basis. But they know some black artists. And so there's an aspect of that where, they can just slide in DMs because the internet, social media, that sort of exposure, they can just slide in DMs. It's not a closed ecosystem anymore. So what people thought were just natural inclinations of how people interact. It's like that. Obviously, that's going to change in the age of information, in the age of social media, and the age of instant social access. I mean, this changes the game. Guys want to talk about, oh, women got unrealistic expectations and they want you to have $1 million. Well, I'm saying, of course, they're going to have warped expectations when they got, a guy that just got signed for the Eagles sliding in their DMs because he just so happens to like, her in a bikini and takes her on a couple of dates. You know what I mean? They hop out of the fucking the fucking IQ, freaking, $200,000 Escalade and they go to a nice restaurant and shit like that, and then go back, and then she's fucking him in the high rise building up against glass overlooking the whole city. Oh, she getting fucked up against the window overlooking the whole city skyline. That's what you got to compete with now. You see, and so those little. That little, I'm in this local town and she's the prettiest girl at the ball. And, that whole Back to the Future and you got the prettiest girl in high school. Man, that shit is dead. And then you throw in like shit like OnlyFans and whatnot. And, any chick above an 8 can make substantially more money than any working man by, putting herself out there on social media in half naked outfits. So the game has totally changed. All a woman needs is 5,000 paying subs, and she can live independently of you. That's all she needs is 5,000 lecherous old men who are rubbing one out to her images, and she's got fuck you money. You see what I'm saying? So everybody who has this rigid, that it's the 1950s and, I'm dating Dolly Parton and she's the prettiest girl in town, like that shit is dead. Get that shit out of your head. You know what I'm saying? So, you got dads and you got, other, white guys out here that they think that it's a closed ecosystem, and it's not. And black women think it's a closed ecosystem, and it's not. Again, this is the whole, when you misdiagnose the problem and you want to point to one thing and you're like, I blame the other side, and you don't factor in anything else, it's going to lead you down the wrong path. It's like the whole thing with, one of the things that Cap, often, acknowledges, he's like, nah, black women were asleep at the wheel when it comes to, the whole, them having, the best bodies and whatnot, because a lot of them don't work out. They used to, go to the club on the weekend and they would dance. There was a lot of dancing that was going on, what I mean? But now, that seems to be dead. And so, when it comes to white women, for example, we all already know, and you can just go on Instagram and find plenty of images. White women out here making asses. They making bodies. You can just see it all over. They got the before and after. The chick will be straight up and down. She ain't got shit going on. You scroll all the way to the bottom, or my favorite is when they have the before or after. They just been in there just doing lunges and squats, and they got ass. So the idea of sisters even have a monopoly on ass, and I'm just using that as an example because a lot of black women seem to just rely on, well, black men like ass, and we got ass, and Becky's ass is flat, and that's all there is to it. And it's like, no, you slept at the wheel. And so you'll have women who are big as a house in the black community, and they'll say, oh, it's colorism. No, you slept at the wheel. You know what I mean? You're not working out. The others are working out, and then you throw in what the woman said to me about, we ain't doing that. Like when I tell you how she said it, just so as a matter of factly, like just we ain't doing that. It reminds me of that clip. There was a clip. I don't know where that white guy went. He was part of the manosphere for a little bit. There's a white guy, and there's a clip of him, and there was a black woman. And I love the clip because he acknowledges how he felt that the black woman was attractive. So it has nothing to do with the idea that she's not attractive. And he was like, beautiful black woman. And I think the conversation was about her making a sandwich or something like that. And she equated it to slavery. She was like, oh, that's slavery. And then this goes into the whole, it's like, okay, well, then what do you do then? I'm talking to the women. Like in other words, you can't just not do anything. You can't sit there and say, "Ooh, soft girl era, soft girl life, sprinkle, sprinkle," and the idea that the only relationship that you want to be in is a relationship where you got a maid and you don't have to do absolutely anything at all, nothing at all. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. Even the white guy that I talk about all the time, the one that's got the business and everything else like that, and his wife, they've gotten into fights over money because she'll do things like, go and, get, a $300 hairstylist like every other week and shit like that. And he's like, the hell, like, what are you doing? What did they even change? You know what I mean? And so they got in arguments about that. But I remember one time, he was at the airport and he forgot something and he was like, look, I need you to do this. I need you to take this. I need you to fax me these documents. Da 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 da. And she was on it. You know what I mean? She was acting as the secretary, because, yeah, again, you know, if I'm out there making the money and all this is, all this contributes to you having your fucking G-Wagon and shit like that. Yeah, when I say I need you to fax me these documents because I forgot them and I need you to, ship this, to the hotel so that when I get there, because I forgot my suit or whatever, it needs to be there. You know what I mean? And she's on it. You know what I mean? And I've heard these stories. So like the idea that they're just like, they're not doing anything. They're not helping prepare so that he's presentable to the business partners and the things that he's doing. I'm telling you, they're doing this shit. I don't know what type of narrative black women got that these white women are just sitting around just doing nothing at all but being princesses. You know what I'm saying? Like that might be the case when you're like Paris Hilton or some shit like that. But even in the well into the six figures, even in the low millionaires, that's not like this whole, they're just sitting around doing nothing. That's not what's going on. They have quite a few responsibilities that they have to fulfill. The white guys are not eager to just throw money away and just throw it out the window so that you can be, his romantic and sexual fantasy. Some of y'all even contradict yourself because, again, you got white men that are successful. They're not even marrying the white women that are the fantasy white women. They're marrying, sevens with a decent personality. So you're contradicting yourself there, and yes, there white men that marry arm candy. Sure, there are. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of most men, period, across the board are looking with a woman that they find reasonably attractive, has enough of her head on her shoulders, and would make a great mom and a great life partner. That's what they're looking for. But some of you all, you got like the myth of white womanhood, where you want to basically be this, this, what was it? What is it? Aristocratic? What's the word I'm looking for? You're part of this white aristocracy, but like the black version. And if black men don't give you that, they're dust. You know what I'm saying? It's like, damn, chick, you don't want to do anything. And I'm like, and that's what you're trying to sell young black men. Again, young black men, they don't feel like they owe you anything. That's one of the mistakes that I constantly see or hear from sisters all the time. I'm like, they don't owe you anything. They didn't get you pregnant. They didn't make you a single mom. You know what I'm saying? You can't put whatever the transgressions you think of the black men of the past, you can't put that on an 18-year-old boy. He don't owe you that shit. You know what I'm saying? So you get these women that and it's like a debt that can never be paid. Like, because, slavery happened, that black men owe black women, or because the white supremacy is doing its white supremacy thing, or making white women the global standard of beauty that, black men must, pay homage to black women and owe this irrepayable debt to black women because of that. Right. And then again, we still exist and function in this community where, it seems to be an issue to prioritize black boys. But then the complaint is, well, black men need to do all these things for black women, not the other way around. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at best, you all like that. You all complain about, okay, your mothers and you had babies and you gave yourself to, a particular man. And a lot of times, like I said, these men, they don't have anything going on, and you can't even articulate why you gave them immortality, why you had his baby. I know a chick right now. She has 2 kids by 2 different men, and she one of the men that she had a baby with, the second guy she had a baby with, doesn't even have a car. When I tell you I was trying so hard to keep a straight face, it was not even funny. Because I'm sitting there and I'm like, so let me get this right. I mean, my brain was just screaming, piss poor decision maker. I get it. You went through trauma when you were younger and you had a baby when you were young. I'll give you the one child. I'll give you the one that something happened. You didn't, your daddy wasn't there, whatever. I'll give you the one. Not that I want to deal with a situation like that, but I'll give you the one. But then when she told him, like, you got 2 kids by 2 different men, and then the second one doesn't even have a car. Like, do you know how crazy you look in saying some shit like that? Like, how, and Six pointed this out in the video that she did. And this is why I greatly appreciate Six, because even though, she's a single mom, she's trying to put y'all on game about this shit. You want this man to pedestalize you and put you and elevate you, and you don't even value your own womb. You know what I mean? We factor that type of stuff into the shit. And then, just even looking at it, the fact that she has custody of the 2 kids further reinforces what I said. You know what I mean? It's like, and on top of the fact that, single mothers don't have the type of time, you're never going to get, her full undivided attention. And then on top of that, then you got to share it, between 2 other niggas? And what's going on with them? You gotta deal with all that? What man wants to deal with all that? So when she was saying the whole, well, black women are, they're going out and they're searching for they're searching for their peace. How many of the women that she's talking about, that she's bringing up, how many of them are already mothers? Not only that, how many of them intend on having more children? You see, how many of them intend on having more children? Because the men that are going monk, the men that are going over the fence, you see them, like these are 2 different dynamics of a single mother saying that, she's seeking peace or whatever. I'm like, chick, you done already been in a relationship, you were already married, you already had kids, whatever the hell the case may be, versus a childless man, who, doesn't have those type of responsibilities, or goes over the fence dealing with other races of women, where at the very least, he can actually start, his own, his own family without too many chefs in the kitchen. And it's like, but the part that gets me is like how that doesn't, like, none of like what black men think or say gets considered or factored in. Like, the women think that they're so right and they're so, just in their opinions that they don't even consider like what's actually going on. They're too dismissive. They're too dismissive of it. I'm like, first off, there's a huge parental gap between black men and black women. That's the first part. So when you're sitting there talking about, oh, how so hard is finding a decent man, we got to sift through scores of mothers. The majority of black men under 50 are childless. The majority of black women under 50 are mothers. Those are the 2 largest demographics in the black community are mothers and childless men. Mothers and childless men are the 2 largest demographics in the black community. So when you hear black men filing complaints or saying what they're saying, and it's a primary reason why there's a gender war. There's a primary reason why you saw Jacoby up there getting shamed on OWN, by Egypt and whoever the other woman was, that was up there, that they were, talking about, you said you don't date single mothers. How many episodes that Yolanda back in the day, that was the episode with the light skin. What's wrong with single mothers? Yeah, it's a problem. And again, just like, what one of the things that Six said in her recent video addressing, the Cardi B situation, she was like, yeah, we didn't have information. You know what I mean? The millennials and whatnot, the older generation that came before us, and I'm so glad she called it out, they would just lie. Okay? They would lie. They would be embarrassed about how they fucked up. They would just lie and didn't tell the truth. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why Captain Solo's not talking to his mother now. Okay, because they would sit there and they would just literally let you go down the path of making the same mistakes that they did. Millennials came online about 10 years ago and hell, more than 10 years ago, and gave everybody the tea. Gen Z has no excuse to go down the stupid path that millennials they just didn't have the information. And again, millennials are really the first generation to really question the shit. And I'd say some of the late Gen Xers, really the first generations to question, what the fuck is going on. So the information is out there. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of videos covering these very topics, talking about break the cycle. So there's really no excuse for this shit now. Not with the newer generations. So the younger men, they're not going for it. They see the pitfalls. Older men have told them. They've told them about the custody battles. They've told them about, the amount of money that they've lost. The most important decision that anybody can make is who you decide to have a child with. I'm not even going to say who you marry. No, it's who you decide to have a child with is the most important decision that you will ever make in your life. You know what I mean? And already from where we stand right now, there is an imbalance in the community. Most of the voices that you're going to hear from black men are men that don't have kids. And that's just the way that it is. So when I hear the whole, we're what you say, not seeking our peace, but we want our peace and whatnot. I'm like, I can listen to that from a black woman who's a part of the 39% of black women who are childless. I can listen to that all day the same way as when it comes to a childless black man saying that. Okay, but when it comes to parents, you know what I mean? You're in a different category. I'm not saying that you can't file a grievance. I'm saying you're in a different category. And I keep that number, I keep those percentages in my head all the time. And because I told you, it changes the whole dynamic. You know what I mean? They're like, whenever we get into these gender war conversations, you got black women that are talking about, that are talking as if they're childless. The same way that Dennis was talking as if he didn't have, two different baby mamas. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That changes the dynamic. We got 4 out of 5 of the black men on this, not 4 out of 5. What would that be? 4 out of the 10 black men on this panel, who are childless versus 6 out of the 10 of the black women on this panel who are mothers. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's you don't see the problem here? That's why it looks the way that it looks. Black women will talk about abandonment and everything else and who's not taking care of the kids and everything. But the majority of black men that enter, that are under the age of 50, that enter a space don't have any kids. Their complaints are complaints of childless men. They're not the complaints of mothers. So when I hear black women who try to say, oh, well, we're saying the same thing, or we have the same complaint, or they try to do this tick for tack or this sort of touche thing. I'm like, no, it's not touche. It's not. Like you're a mother. I'm like, mothers are down the hall, 3 doors down to the left. There's going to be an elevator on your right hand side and on the third floor, and then you go another 2 doors down on the right. And I'm like, and you'll see black men, they're in the room right across the hallway. They're in the conference room across the hallway. That's where you belong. Not in childless men conversation, not in, childless men going over the fence and interracially dating. We going to compare a childless black man going over the fence and interracially dating, to a black mother going over the fence and interracially dating? Huh? It don't even make any sense. And again, like the woman said, I mean, she said it so, I cannot express to y'all how, just as a matter of fact, that she said it. She was like, yeah, black women ain't doing that. Because I brought up the whole thing about, Latina women and white women and Asian women, how they grow up in patriarchal communities. And if a black man minimally can provide, a decent lifestyle, they're cool. They're cool. And they can get along. I mean, I see these guys on Instagram all the time. These brothers that, they're day traders or whatever, and they got their luxury car and everything. And a lot of them, a high percentage of them, are with non-black women. The chick is Asian, the chick is Latina, the chick is white. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what they're dealing with. I remember when Marcus Brownlee was catching smoke because, he got a non-black woman. Like all these guys, are, when you get into that upper echelon, that upper crust, and another reason why, sisters feel some type of way. But I got a woman sitting there talking about we're not going to do that, just as a matter of factly, like it's just built into the culture like that. Like, sisters don't do that. Like, sisters don't do that. Okay, so if sisters don't do that, then why isn't that factored into why these guys are over the fence? Why do you immediately go to, oh, it's colorism? You see what I'm saying? Like there's too many things that are going on. That again, colorism is on the table. Yes, there are men who are colorism. There are colorists. You have successfully identified that this is a flaw in some, unknown percentage of black men. You have sex. I give you that. But that does not mean that you just get up and walk away from the table and say, oh, that's all there is to it. No, you haven't even self-reflected or examined the things that you're not doing that contribute to why the men are over there or the men are not dealing with you. We can talk about the weight. We can talk about the fucking kids out of wedlock. We can talk about the bad attitude. We can talk about the matriarchal beliefs. Like these are real legitimate factors. And again, for her to sit there, you know what I mean? Oh, black men just don't want black women. But I'm like, you just got finished saying, we ain't going to do that. Yeah, that's right. We ain't doing that. When I brought up the whole, I just brought up a random scenario of a black man, with a Hispanic woman. And I'm like, I brought up even my story when I was with the Mexican. I was like, man, I'll tell you, man, I got up from the table. They had cooked food. I ate the food. I got up from the table and went over to the sink to basically, put rinse the plate off, right? Because I done scarfed everything down, all the rice and whatnot. I done scarfed everything down. It was delicious. Okay. And in my mind, in my raised FBA, in the black community with a mom, who is the type of mom that says, I'm not your slave. You know what I'm saying? Like to this day, my mother will say, if I leave, if I eat at their house and I leave a plate there that she cooks and I get up from the table and it's there for more than 15 minutes, you know what I mean? My name is going to be called, and then she's going, somewhere in there is going to be, I don't know what you think this is. I'm not your slave. Right? Even though she cooked the food, right? Man, with that Mexican woman that I was dating, when I got up from the table, and again, all her little Mexican family members were around, I got up from the table and my mentality was, okay, I'm in somebody else's house. This is the courteous thing to do. And on top of that, she cooked the food. The least I can do is wash the dishes or clean the plate. This is what I'm thinking. Man, the women damn near tackled me like they were Secret Service agents, freaking like, and I was trying to, take out the president or some shit like that. You like slow motion, like, no, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, what the fuck did I do? And the men are looking at me like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's women's work. And I was like, oh, well, damn. I was like, yeah, that would totally not fly in the black community. I mean, for you to even articulate that like that, that's women's work. Oh my God. And then that also contributes to why a lot of sisters ain't interested in interracially dating. You know what I mean? One, you got the ones that are just attracted to black men. And then two, they don't want to deal with all that. Number one, it's real patriarchy over there. And then number two, they don't want to have to deal with all the other cultural shit. Okay, all the having to learn their culture, having to explain, them wearing wigs and shit like that. And, maybe even other feelings of, whether those other men are attractive. Sisters don't want to deal with none of that shit. Women are keepers of the culture. Men build and maintain the physical infrastructure. Women are the first teachers. Okay? So, being keepers of the culture, black women ain't really interested in what's going on. They're not trying to acclimate themselves to another races of man's culture. And this is one of the biggest factors of why you don't see the interracial numbers like that when it comes to black women. They're not interested. That whole loyalty thing and whatnot, it's not as deep as a lot of sisters claim it to be. They really are not interested in dealing with, one, real patriarchy, and two, having to learn and adapt to another race of man's culture, and then, have to, ingratiate themselves into how those women act, behave, and operate. Think about that's the scenario I was in. Think about the scenario I was in with the Mexican woman and her family. Think about a black woman being in that same scenario. A black woman who got typical FBA mindset. Think about her being in that scenario and them saying something like that. She would probably be over there like looking at her boyfriend like, you're not going to defend me? You're not going to defend me? What do you mean I got to clean the dishes with the women? And so this is how it goes down. The women service the men and the men. That ain't going to happen. I don't operate like that. Man, that relationship ain't going to last. That is not going to last. And that's another thing that, like, even the black women, there are black women who will acclimate and get down like that and whatnot. But they're not the women who are trying to uphold the quote unquote matriarchal culture. They're not. Okay, those are the black women who can interracially date like that and don't have any issue interracially dating. But all these women, these boss bay energy women, these feminazi women, these like when Jamila Lemieux wrote that article for what was it called? What was that article called? She wrote the article for what was that? What was that damn website called? Oh, it's just slipping my mind. It was Madame, was it Madame Noir? I think it was Madame Noir. And then there was another one. But anyway, where she wrote that article talking about, I'm an unapologetic, staunch feminist. Like, that's a quote. Like you walk in the building, you kick in the door in the building, I'm an unapologetic, staunch feminist. Look, I'm not telling you what to do, but, that's probably not the wisest thing to do, when you're in the dating market. You know what I'm saying? It's probably not, you don't want to lead with that. You know what I mean? But that's how she started the article off. I'll have you know that I'm an unapologetic, staunch feminist. And we already know what happened to her. She ended up being, a single mom. We already know what happened. She was with dude and, he went and got remarried. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't, like, it's so nuts. Like, you cannot fuck with the patriarchal men. You can't fuck with them. Because again, it's not a closed ecosystem and the rest of the world is fucking patriarchal. The rest of the world is patriarchal. Now, again, I'm not saying that the black community doesn't have its host of problems. I'm not saying that black men as a collective don't have less to offer as a patriarchal group than some of the other communities. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of correction that needs to go on with black men. But y'all want you want patriarchal responsibilities that look like other communities without patriarchy. You all don't support patriarchy. So then when you don't get that, you just act like, oh, well, black men are failed patriarchs. I'm like, you're the keepers of the culture. You don't get behind the men and boys in terms of supporting those type of beliefs. You know what I'm saying? Black men not getting economic opportunities from white men. That is one thing. That's one thing. You don't have anything to do with that. But the mindset that black men have about their positioning, you heavily contribute to that. And you guys just constantly dismiss and ignore, you know, just the human nature aspect of male motivations, because it's universal. It's universal. You see this in the white. We are the canaries in the coal mine. Right now, economic opportunities are being stifled in the white community, and white men don't have access to that, and they cannot function and operate like they once did back in the 1950s in a post-World War II economy. And what is one of the main complaints? Oh, it's the male loneliness epidemic. Oh, white men, all they want to do is sit around and play video games. They're shutting down. They're not going out. They're not going to the bars. They're not asking women out. Again, you don't go watch the video, the white boy that I put on the community tab. I'll put it in the description box of this video. Okay, he said everything that I predicted. No Nicodemus style. I've already predicted this. Okay, you take away gainful employment from men, they will shut the fuck down. They have no purpose. They're not eager to go and operate within the matriarchy. Matriarchy doesn't even fucking work without men being gainfully employed. It doesn't work. You need to go up there and service women, and then women try to like do this like patchwork quilt of still maintaining patriarchal responsibilities in a matriarchy, and then act like the men are supposed to operate in service, to women when what is the motivation? You know what I'm saying? You don't like hierarchies, so they don't get praise, they don't get acknowledgement, they don't get the "you're my hero." They don't get none of that. They just get like they're just in constant like boy mode. It's like what black women seem to want is they want black. This goes back to the whole thing that Dr. T. Hassan Johnson talks about, the husband's son. What they want is a black man that operates like he's the woman's son and services the woman and acts like he's her son. Where a woman's son, a son husband, he doesn't have any authority. You know what I mean? I mean, he can't look. It's like there's certain, and then numerous black men have pointed this out. Like, it's like, look, there's a lot of shit that our mothers will say to us as black men. Okay. And we don't like it. You know what I'm saying? Our mothers are the only women who can talk to us crazy, and we'll sit there and we'll tolerate it as black men. Our mothers are the only women who can talk to us crazy, and we'll just sit there and take it because we love our mothers. And we understand she's having a fucking moment. But that doesn't mean that we like the shit. And there's a whole dynamic of shit that y'all just you're arrogant. You arrogantly assume that the way that you are as a black mother is something that black men like. And the thing is like what kills me is like the amount of videos. I'm telling you what the most ignored thing online on YouTube is when it comes to like the gender war and y'all black women just running around, oh, black men hate black women and all this other shit. The main thing that gets ignored are the black women who are streaming live and showing. I just saw a video the other day. The mom coming in and busting in the room. Bam! Where's my cell phone? Where's my cell phone? And she's like, I don't have your cell phone. I mean, the mother was just, it was an example of not only narcissistic personality disorder, but the mother, toxic, motherhood, or toxic black motherhood, to be specific. You know what I mean? This was already pointed out, like with the whole, black mothers be like, and the whole thing with the, all the little skits online. Just type in black mothers be like, and what is it? It's the black woman in the shower cap, in the robe. You know what I mean? Not dolled up, not mixed up, busting in the room. What you doing? Clean up. This room better be clean when I get back. Just picking the fights and shit. You know what I mean? Now we can speculate as to the origin, where that comes from. You know, she feels some type of way because she ain't got no man around and she's stressed out and all this. It could be all that. All of that. All that. Okay? It could be all that. Okay? But I'm just pointing out that even young black women are experiencing, the same thing. But the thing is like young black women are not dating their mothers. When it comes to young black men, that's your template of a black woman. These mothers and the type of shit that they do, and what they're not going to do, and all this other stuff, like all that attitude, all that matriarchy, all that is the example that they set for these young black men. And when they go out there and they're dealing with these other races of women, and again, it's more patriarchal, and the reward system it's there. It's there, yes. The world is way more feminist than it was 50 years ago in every community, without a doubt. But the black community, the FBA black community, is on an accelerated time schedule. The FBA black community is way in the future. But every other community that's out here is not there yet. And again, black men, being the fact that they've grown up in a matriarchy, black men are way more progressive. American black men are way more progressive than many of these other races of women's own men. Which is why, you have, like, I've seen the videos of white women talking about emotional, I'm looking for a man with an emotional IQ and all that stuff. And black men having more game and swag and whatnot. Because they know how to talk to women. So, that's where that comes. Again, it's not a closed ecosystem. That's where that shit comes from. It's not a closed ecosystem. And people are, going where they're celebrated, not tolerated. They're getting what they can, or what they can tolerate best, or what they can get the most of, that they actually like and enjoy, by, hopping the fence if there's certain things within their own community, that they don't like. There's whole sections of IG of y'all think these other communities don't have problems. Oh, yes, they have problems. Oh, yes, there's certain things that the women don't like. There's Arab women speaking out against Arab men. There's Pakistani women speaking out against Pakistani men. You know what I mean? Some of the shit that they're going through, Pakistan, they made some new law that because they have an imbalance in the society, that all the men are obligated to take on more than one wife. Go look it up. Because the women are, they have a surplus of women. So they're trying to encourage the men to take on more than one wife to sort of, correct the balance and whatnot. I'm just saying, like, this is what's going on out here. But I mean, that was a big one for me. That was a big, I shouldn't say a no, but I'm just like, God damn, like, you don't even realize what you just said. She just said that shit as a matter of fact. Yeah, sisters ain't gonna do that. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, how do you think I'm supposed to sell that to young black men? How am I supposed to sell that? You know what I'm saying? Oh, so you're gonna remove that, and then I'm supposed to go to the young black man and say Wakanda forever, and then he's just supposed to have so much gushing pride for the black community that he just keeps it black and only gets with sisters. You know what I mean? And then you still got the kids out of wedlock problem. You still got the weight problem. You still got the black woman attitude problem and what you not going. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you're not even giving me anything to work with here. So the only thing that you're leaving here is just a bag of responsibility. That's it. That's all you're leaving here. That's all I get. And you want me to sell that to young black? It's hard enough, again, without the economic opportunities. You know what I mean? Because like currently right now, like we don't, black men don't control the private sector. We don't have the economic opportunities. So how do you sell these patriarchal responsibilities? And there isn't even the opportunities for them to even meet that requirement. You know what I mean? At least when the drug dealers are coming through and they're talking their shit, you know what I mean? They talking, fentanyl this and fentanyl that. You know what I mean? They got the material wealth to show for it. You see what I'm saying? But when it comes to talking about, the importance of, black men working together and whatnot, yes, in the abstract, many men are recognizing the importance of that, right? Because we got to start somewhere and you got to start from scratch. I'm just saying it's a much harder sell, to sell the idea of being the catalyst for events as opposed to encouraging young men to become a part of a well-oiled machine that's already up and functioning. You seem like it's like trying to get people on board of a starter company, you know what I mean, or a startup company versus, joining a massively successful, mega corporation, where, they can immediately start getting paid, within the first 2 weeks. That's totally different. Listen, this is your plan. Here's your 401k, and here's your benefits package, and here's your moving bonus, and blah 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 blah. Like, yeah, that's easy to get people to sign up for that, but to sign up for, you know, hey, we got to do what we were doing in the 1920s before the communities were burnt down, like, and then you got women talking about what they not gonna do. And then you have all this integrationist mentality of like, we're all Americans. Fuck being black. We're American first. And you can date who you want to date and interracially date and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, that ain't going to fix the black community. That's just going to lead to a brain drain. You know what I mean? But I mean, like I said, man, the way that she said, yeah, we're not doing that. I'm like, so why should they be with you again? Well, I mean, Wakanda forever, and they need to make black babies and this, that, and the third. But I'm like, there's more to it than that. I'm like, you're not offering any of the goddamn creature comforts that men are looking for. And the crazy thing is the creature comforts that you're looking for actually cost money. The creature comforts that men are looking for don't really cost you much other than time and energy. With men, it's time, energy, and money. With women, it's just time and energy. So I'm just like, oh my God, man. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I guess this is just what it is. But I'm just sharing this with y'all because, that whole thing about misdiagnosing the problem and then just walking away like, oh, I had the answer and I've successfully blamed the other side. You know what I mean? And then you're not self-reflective of what's going on with you. And then you think that you can come into the argument and then make the exact same point. I'm like, first off, stop right there. You're not even in the same category. If you are a parent, you're not. These men that are complaining, by and large, are childless. That's why they're always complaining about single mothers, because most of them are childless. You're a parent. Oh, I'm done. I'm done with Tyrone. I'm done with this. I'm done with that. Like, you are so further ahead of where this man is mentally. In terms of like, oh, I lived with a man for 6 years and we had a kid together and we got a 5-year-old and he put me through so much and da da da. He's not even there. This brother's not even there. You know what I'm saying? He can't even get a chick to be ready on time. You know what I'm saying? He can't even, get a chick to not, cancel on him or something like that. He can't get a chick to be cooperative. He over the fence now, and then you're bitching, trying to conflate him with your baby. Yeah, and these black men, they always go out here and then get us pregnant and then go out here and get with white. That's not the same dudes. That's not the same dudes. By and large, it's not the same dudes. The guys that you see over the fence don't have any damn kids. Or then you get the women that make the retroactive arguments. Like, oh, where was he when I was single and childless? Oh, that's because they was unavailable because they was over the fence with Becky. No, stop that. Again, like Six said in her video, a lot of women have kids for different reasons. That shit is beyond me. That whole, but the other women that I recently talked to, I mean, you got a kid by Your second baby daddy doesn't even have a car, and you had his child. Like I had to sit there. I cannot express to you how hard it was for me to keep a straight face. I was trying to make sure my pupils don't fucking dilate when she said that, because my sympathetic nervous system was going fucking buck wild on the inside. I was like, how the fuck? I'm like, what is this? What am I on? Like Kevin Samuel's show in real time? No car. And they don't want you to think about how crazy, like, these other conversations sound later. Yes, ladies, get what you deserve. Get what you deserve. Yes, we're divesting. We're this, we're that. Like, imagine how crazy that shit sounds. You had a baby by a nigga that ain't got no fucking car. And you talking about what you feel you deserve. That looks crazy to childless men. It looks crazy. Hell, it looks crazy to anybody. But it most certainly looks crazy to childless men. You know what I'm saying? And one of the things, this is one of the things that, in our conversation, one of the things that Cap really, drove home. Yeah, a lot of childless men do want black women to recognize, their value in being childless the same way that it's recognized in other communities. And it's just simply not recognized that way. It's not recognized that way. Black women look at black men like the world revolves around them in the black community. And, as long as you being childless, it has no real value to it. And again, this goes back to the, the whole thing where, black men should be operating technically speaking, they do when because it's surprising to find a black woman of a particular age, 25 or older, who doesn't have any kids. That's rare. Remember, 77% of the black women who are ever going to be mothers in the black community are mothers by age 25. 77%. That's almost 80%. So between 26 and 40, you know what I'm saying? You only got 20% of the black women who are going to become mothers after that point, right? Or 23% after that point that are going to become mothers, between, 26 and 40, let's just say. Or actually, technically speaking, it goes all the way up to 50, 26 and 50. But we already know, women have a different biological clock than men do. Right? But, seriously speaking, black women act like, childless men are just, or speak like childless men are, just so rare, but they damn sure don't act like it. Y'all act like childless niggas are a dime a dozen. Yeah, because they're everywhere. You know what I mean? With 54%, they're everywhere. You all can throw rocks without hitting fathers. We as black men, it's very difficult for us to throw a rock without hitting a single mother. That's just the way that it is. So and again, none of this is about bashing. It's really about getting, some of you all to understand what's really going on out here, because some of you all continue to have these out of context, out of reality, not knowing any of, not even being within the ballpark. You're just throwing around these numbers the same way that the white guys, are doing when they run around screaming about mud sharks and screaming as there's twice as many white men married to Asian women as black men are married to white women. But you don't hear them talk, the reason why the white birth rates are down is because of white men getting with Asian women. No, they go right to, it's because black men are snatching up all the white women. They go right to that. I'm like, how are you going to overlook the fact that more of you all are with Asians? How you going to overlook that and then go to the smallest demographic and sit there and file a complaint? And then completely ignore the fact that, again, white folks not having babies, that's an in-house problem. And it's primarily because the white oligarchs and the white boomers are hoarding the wealth. That's why. It ain't got nothing to do with black people. Nothing. Now, the same thing with the DeCarlos Brown on the train. Oh, so now the black men are out here killing all the white women, and that's why, white men the birth rates are down in the white community because black men done killed all the white women. You know what I'm saying? Again, misdiagnosing the problem. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just the dumbest shit in the world. What's wrong with her? Oh, she's got stage 4 cancer. And then you go to the doctor and then, oh, it's a mild cough. No, she's got stage 4 cancer. That's what her problem is. It's not a mild cough. You know what I mean? Grossly misdiagnosing the problem. So then you sitting there, telling her to, oh, just go get some Robitussin. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to solve the problem. Misdiagnosing the problem is a big issue. And a lot of people do it intentionally so that they can, effectively assign blame to an outside force, and so that they don't have to be self-reflective about, what's going on with them as to what they're doing to contribute to the problem. So anyway, I'm done with this video. It's pretty long, but I hope I was clear. I know I jumped around a little bit, but that's all I got for y'all. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.
On the scene, diamond blingy, whole screen, checkerboard, Louis V. I'm so fresh and so clean. Stuff them bands in my jeans, slap them 30s in them things. Pull the trigger, let it sing. Then go smoke a Russian cream.
Move. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hello?
Where
Where we at? Oh, you want to know where I'm at? We outside!